The body positive movement began as pushback against rigid, exclusionary beauty standards. Its core idea is simple. Every body has inherent worth, and no one deserves shame or discrimination for their shape, size, or weight. It does not mean ignoring health. It does not mean pretending obesity has no real medical implications. It means separating a person's humanity from their BMI. Dr. Rebecca Poole is one of the world's leading researchers on weight stigma. She presses that one can talk about obesity as a public health issue, but you cannot shame people into getting healthier. Shame does the opposite. It's morally wrong, scientifically ineffective, and socially destructive. Dr. Katz, while not saying anything incorrect, misses the point. Yes, morbid obesity is a medical issue that we cannot ignore the reality of. Personally, I agree with the medical framing. But the biggest root causes of the American obesity epidemic are widespread socioeconomic problems. Jessamine Stanley, founder of The Underbelly, a yoga group focused on creating a safe space for often abused sects of society, explains how traditional yoga culture makes larger bodies feel unwanted or out of place. I agree with her that plus-sized people deserve to take up space and exist in wellness spaces without shame. Beauty is not tied to shape or size. Our society incorrectly treats plus-size and morbidly obese as interchangeable. Sabrina Strings discusses how body standards are shaped by race, culture, and power, and ideas about acceptable weight differ dramatically across different communities. Western thinness ideals have roots in racism, colonialism, and classism. Aaron Flores, a dietitian, talks about how doctors discuss weight. He argues that the healthcare system treats weight like a moral failing, and that many people avoid medical care because conversations about weight are humiliating, demeaning, or dismissive. A reality which is unspeakably damaging, especially due to the health risks linked to real obesity, and the underlying conditions that can lead to unhealthy weight gain or retention. Obesity as an epidemic should not be linked to beauty. Fat bodies can be beautiful, skinny bodies can be beautiful, muscular bodies can be beautiful. There is an incredible gap in what is considered plus size and what is morbidly obese, yet we as a society treat all plus size individuals as though they are morbidly obese.
More liquid gold. Well, I just met non-liquid gold. You know where it was? Iowa. It's called corn. It's non-liquid. That's much. You have more non-liquid gold. They said, what is that? I said, corn. They said, we love that idea. You know, that's a pretty cool thought, isn't it? That's a nickname in its own way, but we came up with a new couple of words for corn.
Millions of people have been pushed, inch by inch, dollar by dollar, into a diet specifically engineered to be cheap, addictive, and inevitable. Today, we're pulling back the curtains on the American diet and examining the system where poverty is a business model, misfortune is a source of profit, and the lives of hundreds of thousands of people have been sacrificed to a $300 billion industry. And it's all federally subsidized.
It's cold!
And it's connected to every problem in America. For decades, the United States government has poured billions of dollars into corn subsidies, way more than any other crop. During the Great Depression, FDR's administration passed the Agricultural Adjustment Act of 1938, which established price supports and quotas for key commodity crops, including corn. This guaranteed income to farmers, encouraging mass production of corn, as they literally could not fail. So long as they kept growing, the federal government would cover any losses they experienced. At this time, this was actively positive for the economy and the American people, who were starving, but it quickly turned. The Reagan administration was fueled by greed and greed alone. With an abundant supply of cheap corn, the food industry started converting it into high-fructose corn syrup, starches, oils, fillers. These components are inexpensive, shelf-stable, and highly functional in mass food production. And the industry snuck those products into everything they could. During the soft drink boom of the 80s, companies switched from traditional sugar to high-fructose corn syrup because it was cheaper and easier to blend. That helped drive mass consumption of sugary drinks, and studies showed that liquid calories don't fill us up like solid food, so people don't automatically compensate by eating less. Over time, those extra calories accumulate. Corn-based processed foods are calorie-dense and nutrient-poor. They don't satisfy hunger the way whole foods do, so people eat more and stay hungry. Today, over 75% of all packaged foods contain at least one corn derivative. Now, before we really talk about obesity, I'd like to set out a disclaimer. The way Americans envision obesity is ridiculous. Humans come in all shapes and sizes. We have since the prehistoric era. There is a difference between fatness and morbid obesity. America has a high percentage of morbid obesity, especially in childhood. That is a problem. Being fat isn't. As a society, we speak about plus-size individuals in a way that is detrimental to their mental health, and mental health is closely linked to physical health. If there's a TLC channel episode about you, you probably need to change something in your life. The majority of what we consider obese in America is perfectly fine fatness which has existed for centuries. The anorexic diet crazes of the 80s to early 2000s are still affecting our perceptions of what is and isn't a healthy or acceptable body, and that serves only to harm people. Obesity can cause insulin resistance, the path towards type 2 diabetes, chronic inflammation, dyslipidemia, and fatty liver disease, which can progress into fibrosis. There's also cardiovascular risks: hypertension, accelerated plaque buildup, heart failure, coronary disease. Cardiovascular disease is the #1 obesity-related cause of death. Obesity is also a physical strain on the body. The mechanical load can become too much to carry. That's why some people get so obese they can't walk. It increases risks for cancer, digestive issues, sleep issues, but that's not all. There's a psychological impact, usually due to the social stigma of people with obesity, and, reminder here, obese does not mean fat. We are talking about morbid obesity, 600-pound sisters type deal, not your friendly neighborhood plus-size model who is living her best life and being cyberbullied because ignorant troglodytes don't know the difference between obese and size 4X. People with obesity struggle with higher rates of depression and anxiety. They also face socioeconomic and medical discrimination, lower wages, poor medical care, where doctors blame unrelated symptoms on their weight, higher insurance premiums, which don't get me started on the institution of insurance, bias in employment, bias in dating, bullying. These can compound poverty, which then compounds dietary limitations, which then compounds obesity. It's a trap. Processed corn-based foods are the cheapest calories on the market. When you're poor, which is an unacceptably widespread problem in America, your choices disappear. You're juggling bills, transportation costs, long work hours, and low wages. Fresh food costs more, spoils faster, takes more time to prepare, and is harder to access in many low-income neighborhoods. Cheap food becomes the rational choice, sometimes the only choice. When the government subsidizes mountains of corn but barely subsidizes fruits and vegetables, the price gap widens. People with low income end up eating what the system makes affordable: ultra-processed, corn-heavy foods, things that fill but don't feed. That's why obesity isn't evenly distributed across the income spectrum. But that statistical fact often ends up toted in the arguments of idiots and bigots who try to turn poverty and obesity into a moral failure on the part of the sufferer. Furthermore, Black and brown communities face higher poverty rates because of decades of discriminatory policy in housing, employment, wages, inherited wealth, and neighborhood investment. The neighborhoods left underfunded and segregated by racist policies like redlining, restrictive covenants, educational access, are the same neighborhoods that today have the worst food environments. Historically, redlined neighborhoods have fewer supermarkets and more unhealthy food retailers. Redlined areas show higher exposure to unhealthy food environments, and food deserts overwhelmingly align with formerly redlined Black majority neighborhoods. The same racist policy that segregated housing and denied Black families wealth also created nutritional inequality. But race isn't the only factor driving inequity. LGBTQ+ adults and youth face disproportionate rates of poverty, housing instability, and food insecurity, and trans people in particular experience very high levels of food insufficiency when they're poor. Trans people also have the highest risk of being hate crimed, starting with Black trans women at the highest risk and working through every other type of trans before even touching another demographic. Discrimination is rampant in hiring, familial rejection, which drives youth homelessness, barriers to stable housing and health care. All of these raise the probability that someone will rely on emergency food systems, shelters, SNAP benefits, low-cost retail outlets, places where corn-based, ultra-processed foods dominate. Anti-queer legislature and the allowances made for idiocy and bigotry towards queer people comes mostly from the systemic patriarchy in America. It's so heavily instilled in us that people who deviate are unfathomable to the smaller-minded folk. As such, those people are often faced with erasure and assault. But the patriarchy also, obviously, affects a much bigger demographic, the only minority that's not technically actually a minority. Sexism shows up in the labor market, the caregiving economy, and the social safety net. Women, especially single mothers, are disproportionately poor, time poor, and burdened by caregiving. That structural reality pushes many mothers towards low-cost, quick, calorie-dense meals because they must feed children on tight schedules and budgets. For many low-income mothers, the trade-off is between paying rent and buying fresh produce. It's often not a choice. Time poverty and precarious work means less capacity to cook whole foods. Retailers in low-income areas stock shelf-stable processed items that rely on corn inputs. The compounding factors, especially the wage and time-based ones, leave women, especially mothers, trapped in a tantalus pit, where cheap corn products may be the only options in reach. People with disabilities also experience higher poverty rates, higher medical costs, and often reduced mobility, literally and economically, all of which increase dependence on cheap, ready-to-eat foods. The CDC notes that people with disabilities face particular challenges to eating healthy and maintaining physical activity. And food insecurity rates are higher for households that include someone with a disability. Inaccessible stores, inability to carry groceries, unreliable transportation, and kitchen accessibility problems all bias choices towards convenience foods that are corn derivative heavy. Furthermore, the social nets that are supposed to catch disabled people are horribly understaffed and incredibly ineffective. Ableism is baked into infrastructure and services. When you can't shop easily or you face extra medical bills and income loss, the cheapest, easiest food wins, which tends to be, say it with me now, corn-based. For more on SSI and SSDI, there's an argumentative essay I wrote in high school linked in the description. So here's the pattern we're seeing here. Systemic oppression puts certain groups at a higher risk for becoming impoverished, and American food and farm policies push corn-based products onto low-income households and individuals, which can lead to weight gain and health problems, which can further deepen the hole they're in financially, creating a cycle. Corn goes into high-fructose corn syrup solids, dextrose, maltodextrin, glucose-fructose blends, ethanol, which is incredibly harmful for the environment, thickeners, stabilizers, anti-caking agents, bulking agents, crisping agents, texture modifiers, oils, and greases. So companies use corn products to make the cheapest soda, the cheapest snack, the cheapest frozen meal, the cheapest fast food, the cheapest baked goods, and the cheapest caloric sources become the most widely available. High fructose corn syrup in sodas acts differently from the same calories eaten as fruit or whole food. Liquid sugar doesn't trigger the same satiety hormones, empties from the stomach rapidly, spikes blood pressure fast, and fails to reduce hunger before the next meal, so soda calories are add-on calories, not substitute calories. Fructose is also metabolized in the liver. Large amounts overwhelm the liver's capacity and promotes lipogenesis, the creation of fat. Insulin resistance, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, disrupted hunger/satiety signals, and all of this is amplified when combined with poverty because stress hormones elevate appetite and craving for high-energy foods. America has an obesity problem because we have a poverty problem and a business problem. No other nation subsidizes corn the way we do, uses corn so vastly, or ties food assistance programs to cheap ingredients. This means we are a country of heightened exposure to obesogenic foods from marginalized groups and measurable disparities in food insufficiencies and diet-related health. Obesity as an epidemic should not be linked to beauty. It should be linked to the socioeconomic factors that breed, not only the conditions that create obesity, but the socioeconomic conditions that drive other people to have fuzz in their heads and hate in their hearts. No fat shaming. Oh wait, I never actually finished this. See, here in the closing, I've written, no fat shaming isn't okay, stop being stop growing corn, and be mad. No fat shaming isn't okay, and we certainly shouldn't be bringing it back. What we should bring back is healthy whole foods and an economy structured around artisan work and small business. Allowing corn to dominate our shelves and dollars has cost people life and limb. No one is safe from misfortune. It comes like a thief in the night. What happens when you get sick, lose your job, and your only choice becomes Fritos and soda? What happens when your grocery store stops stocking kale and chicken? What happened to compassion in this country? That was a dumb closer. P.S. If you're big corn, don't kill me. This is just an assignment.
Me, I really like corn.
What do you like about corn?
It's corn! A big corn that knobs. It has the juice.